The river was running high that spring, swollen from rains that had clawed down from the mountains and left the desert trembling with new life. To most men, it was a blessing. Water meant grass, grass meant cattle, cattle meant survival. But for Malachi Brooks, standing knee-deep in the current, it meant danger. The river was a living thing, violent and unforgiving, and it had already claimed more than one careless soul. The roar of it filled his ears, drowning out the desert silence he had grown so used to. He was about to turn back toward his horse when he saw a scrap of fabric caught on the jagged roots of a half-fallen tree. At first, he thought it was nothing more than the river playing tricks on his eyes, another branch twisting in the current. But then he saw a hand, small, slack, pale against the churning water. Malachi's breath caught. He was moving before his mind caught up, plunging deeper into the river, boots slipping against slick stones. The current fought him, dragging at his legs, trying to pull him under. But he had lived too long in the West to give up when the fight turned ugly. The child broke free of the roots just as Malachi lunged, the body rolling in the water like a rag doll. His hands closed around an arm, thin as kindling, and he hauled upward with everything he had. The weight was heavier than it should have been, soaked clothing dragging the boy deeper into death's grasp. For one terrifying moment, Malachi thought he had been too late, that he was only pulling a corpse into the light. But when he staggered back toward the bank and collapsed onto the mud, he felt the faint flutter of breath against his wrist. Shallow, fragile, but still there. The boy's chest rose and fell in stuttering rhythm. His skin was ice cold, his lips blue. Malachi rolled him gently onto his side, pressing on his back, forcing the river from his lungs. The child convulsed, coughed, and a stream of water spilled from his mouth. Then, with a sound halfway between a sob and a gasp, the boy drew air again. Malachi sat back, soaked to the bone, watching the miracle with grim disbelief. His pulse thundered in his ears, but beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred a recognition. This was no settler's child. The dark hair, the sharp cheekbones, the beaded string knotted around the boy's wrist. Apache. Malachi's jaw tightened. He looked around the banks, half expecting shadows to rise from the mesquite, warriors emerging to accuse him of harm. But the river was empty, the desert still. Whoever this boy belonged to, he had been alone when the river tried to take him. The child's eyes fluttered open, black and glassy, staring at Malachi as though caught between worlds. His lips parted, whispering something in a tongue Malachi could not understand. Then his head sagged, too weak to hold itself up, and his small hand twitched once before falling still. Malachi carried him back to the horse, cradling the boy against his chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the river had left its mark not only on the child, but on Malachi himself. He laid the boy across the saddle, swung up behind him, and turned toward his ranch. The ride was long, the boy's shallow breaths rattling like dry leaves. Malachi's mind drifted to memories he had tried to bury. Another boy, smaller still, his hair just as dark, slipping beneath water while Malachi's hands clawed at the surface. His own brother, gone before he ever had the chance to grow. Malachi had lived with that guilt like a stone lodged in his chest, sharp and unmovable. Saving this child felt like reaching back through time, like clawing his way toward redemption. When he reached the ranch, Mrs. Crane was already waiting on the porch, her weathered face tightening at the sight of what he carried. She asked no questions, only ushered them inside, fetching blankets, kindling a fire, pressing a warm cloth to the boy's chilled skin. Between them, they coaxed life back into his fragile body, spooning drops of broth past his lips until color slowly crept into his cheeks. Hours passed. The sun fell low, painting the desert in blood and fire. Still, no riders appeared on the horizon. No shouts, no accusations. Only the quiet breathing of the rescued boy, asleep on Malachi's bed as though he belonged there. But Malachi knew better. Nothing in this land went unnoticed. The Apache did not lose their children easily, and if they did not forgive strangers for taking them in. Night crept heavy and long. Malachi sat by the fire, the boy's shallow breaths steadying his own. Mrs. Crane dozed in her chair, shotgun still within reach, as though expecting trouble to ride in before dawn. And when the first streaks of pale light split the horizon, trouble did come. Malachi woke to the sound of hooves. Not a handful, but many. The kind of thunder that makes the earth itself vibrate. He rose slowly, his hand instinctively brushing the butt of his Colt. The boy stirred in the bed, as if sensing what approached. Malachi stepped onto the porch. The dawn light spilled across the land, and with it came the riders. Not 10, not 20, a flood of them. Apache warriors, faces painted, feathers trembling in the morning wind, their horses moving in silent unison. 150 at least, stretching across the horizon like a wave of vengeance. They did not shout. They did not cry out in fury. They came in silence, and the silence was worse than war drums. Malachi's breath caught in his chest. His fingers tightened on the rail. Behind him, the boy whimpered in his sleep. The warriors reined in before the ranch, the ground trembling beneath so many hooves. Their leader, tall and broad, his hair streaked with gray, rode forward. His gaze locked on Malachi, piercing and unreadable. Malachi swallowed hard, knowing the truth in his bones. He had pulled a child from the river and saved his life, but in doing so, he had drawn the gaze of an entire people, and whatever judgment they carried in silence, it was about to fall. The silence of 150 warriors pressed on Malachi's chest heavier than the river ever had. It was not anger that weighed in their stares, nor gratitude, nor anything so simple. It was something deeper, a judgment forged by centuries of blood, loss, and the fragile balance between their people and his. The leader sat astride a dun-colored horse, his back straight as a spear, his eyes sharp as obsidian. His face was weathered but proud, the kind of face carved not by time but by survival. Around his neck hung a string of polished stones, each one catching the dawn light like a fragment of fire. His gaze lingered on Malachi for a long, measured moment before sweeping past him to the door of the ranch house. Malachi felt it like a blade sliding between his ribs. They knew. The boy was inside. He shifted slightly, enough to place his body between the warriors in the doorway, though he knew the gesture meant little against so many. His hand hovered near his gun belt, but some instinct told him drawing would be suicide. Guns spoke in the language of finality. Right now, silence was still speaking. The leader raised one hand. At once, the wave of riders halted. The creak of leather and snort of horses swallowed back into stillness. Then he dismounted, moving with the calm weight of a man who had never once doubted his authority. His boots pressed into the earth, each step deliberate as he closed the distance. When he stopped at the foot of the porch, Malachi saw something in his eyes, not rage, but grief. The kind of grief a man wears when he has nearly lost what cannot be replaced. "You pulled my son from the river." The words came in heavily accented English, each one shaped like it had been hammered on an anvil. Malachi's throat felt dry.
"I did. He was drowning. I couldn't leave him."
The leader studied him, long and silent. Then his gaze softened by a fraction, but only a fraction. He stepped aside, motioning with his hand. Two women dismounted from the ranks and came forward. They moved swiftly past Malachi without a word, into the house. A mother's cry split the air as one of them knelt beside the bed. The boy stirred, blinking awake at the sound of her voice. His weak hand rose, trembling, and the woman gathered him into her arms as though to stitch him back into her very skin. Malachi turned his face away, giving them the moment. But the leader never moved his eyes from him. "You saved him." The words were not soft. They carried weight, as though saving a life did not free Malachi from danger but bound him tighter to it. "I did what any man would do," Malachi said carefully. The leader's gaze hardened, as if weighing the truth of that. No. Many would have let the river take him. Fewer would have carried him into their home. Behind the leader, the mounted warriors shifted, their silence now threaded with murmurs too low for Malachi to catch. He felt the weight of their suspicion, of their judgment, of their history pressing down on him. The boy's mother reappeared in the doorway, her cheeks wet with tears. She spoke to the leader in a voice trembling with gratitude, words spilling out like prayer. The leader cut him off with a sharp glance. "It is not for you to decide what is necessary. A life was returned. Gifts must be given." Malachi swallowed hard, at a loss. He could feel Mrs. Crane's eyes through the window, sharp with suspicion, but even she did not step out to interfere. The air itself seemed to hum with the weight of ceremony. When the last warrior had laid his offering, the leader stepped forward again. He drew from his belt a knife not to threaten, but to present. Its handle was carved from elk bone, its blade polished to a silver gleam. He held it out, flat across his palms. "This belonged to my father, and to his father before him. Now it belongs to you. Not because you are one of us, but because you returned blood to blood." Malachi's hands hovered uncertainly before he accepted the blade. The weight of it was heavy, not in metal, but in meaning. The leader's eyes narrowed.
Do you understand what you have done, rancher?
Malachi shook his head slowly. "I saved a boy." The leader leaned closer, his breath steady as the dawn wind. "You tied yourself to us. When the river tried to take him, death opened its hand. You reached in and pulled him back. That binds you. And now we are bound to you." The words chilled Malachi more than any threat could have. Bound. It was not gratitude. It was obligation, forged in something older than law, older than any paper treaty signed by men in distant cities. The warriors mounted again in silence. The boy, still weak, was carried carefully in his mother's arms, cradled as though he were the fire at the center of their people. The leader lingered a moment longer, his shadow stretching long across the porch. "We will watch this land," he said finally. "Any who threaten it will find us standing here. Not for you, for the boy, for what you did." Malachi opened his mouth to protest, to explain that he had not asked for this, that such promises could draw more trouble than they solved. But the leader was already turning, his voice rising in a single word that sent the warriors flowing away like water breaking from a dam. The thunder of hooves faded into the desert, leaving behind only dust, silence, and the pile of gifts at Malachi's feet. Mrs. Crane stepped onto the porch at last, her eyes sweeping over the offerings. "Well," she muttered, voice low but sharp, "you've gone and done it now." Malachi stared after the departing riders, the knife heavy in his hand. "What exactly have I done?" Mrs. Crane gave him a long look, her lips pressed thin. "You've stepped into a river that doesn't let go, and now, boy, you'd best be ready, because nothing in this world comes without a price." The dawn sun rose higher, throwing its light over the ranch, over the knife, over Malachi's weary face. He had saved a child, yes. But he could feel it in his bones. The true cost of that salvation was only just beginning to show its shape. The days passed in uneasy silence. Malachi worked the ranch, but every sound reminded him he was not alone. Someone was out there, watching. The gifts inside the house stayed untouched. Mrs. Crane tried to hide them, but Malachi stopped her. "They were given. We don't hide them." She warned they might bring trouble, and she was right. Trouble came with smoke. A thin line on the horizon grew into a black column. By nightfall, the Carter homestead was ash house burned, barn collapsed, wagon overturned. The family was gone. This was no accident. Raiders had struck. That night, Malachi returned heavy with what he'd seen. And even before he spoke, he heard it hoofbeats in the dark. They had returned. Figures emerged from the ridges, calm and silent, led by the same man as before. Malachi told him, "The Carters are gone. Raiders did it. They'll come this way." The leader's eyes burned steady. "You saved my son. Your fight is now ours." Blood calls to blood. 2 nights later, the raiders came, drunk, armed, torches blazing. Malachi was ready, but not enough. The first rider never reached the porch. An arrow dropped him cold. Another torch fell into the dirt. The allies were there. Swift, precise, deadly. The battle tore through the night, gunfire, arrows, shouts breaking the silence, and when it ended, the yard was quiet again. The raiders lay broken. Survivors fled. Malachi stood breathing hard. The leader stepped from the smoke. This bond is not gift, not burden. It is blood. Malachi clasped his hand. Two worlds, once divided, now tied by a single act. One man saving one child. And when dawn came again, Malachi knew one truth: he would never face it alone. Sometimes the choices that change history are the ones made in silence, when no one is watching, when a man reaches into the river and refuses to let go. Malachi Brooks never asked to be bound to another people, never sought out gifts or warriors at his door. But by saving one boy, he saved himself and found a family where he thought there was none. And that's the truth buried deep in every forgotten corner of the West. Kindness cuts deeper than steel, and debts written in blood are never erased. If you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, the ones where courage is quiet and salvation comes from unexpected hands, then share this tale. Let it live beyond this screen. Because history isn't just written in books, it's carried in voices. And tonight, you are that voice. This is the haunting story of a cowboy, a drowning child, and 150 warriors who came in silence.